Hey everybody, this is Kevin Steinhauser, and I'm excited to be streaming with you tonight about AP Lang. Excited for the new school year, which has started for some of us. Some of us are getting close to coming back to school. Here's what I would like to do. There's some people who have signed up who are either going to be coming a little bit later watching the replay. If you're with me live, could you just throw an introduction into the chat? Let me know when you started school or when you're about to start school, just to kind of get some introductions. If you want to say where you're from, you can throw that in terms of what state you're at. We'll give everyone a minute if they're coming in, and then we'll get going with our presentation tonight. What's up, Dylan? Good to see you. So I'm from Colorado. We got Brandon from Texas. Brandon's one of our streamers. What's up? So Brandon's going to be streaming, I think, tomorrow night about AP Lang. So we'll talk about just tonight some overview stuff about AP Lang, but really wanted to have anyone who's in here, even if you're not a current AP Lang student, like I know Brandon, you took it last year, let's talk about get yourself back into the mindset of an AP language student as we're talking through this. I'm going to create a poll as we're getting started. Here's what I'm going to ask us just to kind of launch us into AP Lang for the year. And if you already took AP Lang again, put yourself back into the shoes of someone. So what are you most worried about this year? The writing, the reading, or other? So I'm going to put that poll live. If you're with me, go ahead and vote on what you're most worried about this year. What's stressing you out? What are you most nervous about for AP language specifically? And if you come late, feel free to go throw that poll in. Right now, I've got 2 votes for writing, 2 votes for reading, 3 votes for writing. All right, so keep those coming in if you are just joining us a second late. So I think that's really telling. I know we have a small sample size, but they're both big beasts that we have to tackle this year. So I have good news. Reading and writing are intertwined, but we're going to look at them separately and together just at different times this year. All right, so let's go ahead and launch into what we're looking at tonight. I'll look at what you said here, Dylan. I'm mostly worried because every other English class I've taken has been very literary. Yeah, this is a good point. Whereas language is very nonfiction. Great point. So even if you're like top of your class with 9th and 10th grade English, when you get to AP language, it might just be a different skill set slightly. Depends on what your 9th and 10th grade classes look like. So that's kind of the whole point of this slide tonight, this presentation tonight. How to read like an AP student. Let's talk about it. Before we do, if you are a new student to Fiveable, or if you've been with us but don't follow us on social media, take a look. Anything that you're on, we're probably on as well. Always just thinking through how can we continue to drive forward this year, getting these 5s on our AP exams. How can we be most successful? All right, so Brandon's in the chat. I was just talking about this. So tomorrow he will be talking about new rubrics. This is great for new students to AP Lang, or even teachers who have been teaching AP Lang or new to AP Lang, who just want to know what changes are happening to our class this year. So the skills are going to be the same, but the rubrics are going to look different. So Brandon's going to do a deep dive of that tomorrow night. We also have a couple other streamers with us. Stephanie Kirk's a teacher who has been teaching AP Lang for a while. She's going to do a great overall exam overview, just talking about what's on the test, what to expect, and what's different than last year kind of holistically. I'm really excited for Brandon to also be doing this series that he'll be doing monthly of the most important must-know current events each month. So he's going to start that next week, just kind of recapping the most important things that happened while we were away from school over the summer. So that's all coming up, AP Lang specific streams on Fiveable. All right, let's start to talk about how to read like an AP student. And when I'm doing that, I got to first start to say how not to read like an AP student. I've been teaching AP language for almost a decade now. I've been a teacher for about that long. There's been a couple years that I didn't teach AP language, but most years that I've been teaching, this has been kind of my world. So I'm talking about this based on trends that I see just across my students, and I also reflecting back to when I was a student. This is how not to read. So first, don't read to answer questions. If you're worrying about the questions, you're often missing the bigger point of just reading and reading comprehension. So I used to tell my students, flip to the questions, read them first, they'll guide your reading. I actually encourage the opposite now. I tell my students, don't even look at the questions until you understand the passage. Now, some students might have a better method. Some students, even Brandon, if you took it last year, I don't know what you did. Some students might say, I'm actually more successful by looking at the questions. Hey, I'm willing to hear that. Every student's different. Every reader is different. But the trend is students are less successful when they look at the questions first. And again, the reason is because they are looking for the answers as opposed to just reading to read and to understand. All right, so second, how not to read like an AP student. Don't look for just rhetorical devices. So this is not a matching game. You'll hear me say that through my streams this year. AP language is not about matching. AP language instead is about holistic understanding of a text. So if you don't even know what I'm talking about with rhetorical devices, don't stress. All that is just some terminology that you'll learn throughout the course this year. It's not about like plugging and placing the devices. So let's use a simple one that I know everyone knows, a metaphor. The point is not to go find metaphor and symbolism and simile in the text. The point is to say, okay, what does the text say? And then AP language is, how does the author achieve his purpose or her purpose? So rhetorical devices are part of the picture, but they are not the point of the picture. All right, in tandem with that, I'm going to use this metaphor a lot this year as well. Don't lose the forest for the trees. So that's kind of an old cliche saying. What that means is don't be so caught up into the little details that you lose the bigger picture. So every time you're reading a passage, focus on the first paragraph. Don't plow through it. Don't move to the second paragraph until you understand what that paragraph is doing and saying. Once you do that, you can move on, and just don't lose sight of that first paragraph though. You have to consider how these texts build together. So what students do when they kind of read and they're giving their best, but they just aren't reading like an AP student. They'll read a paragraph, understand that paragraph to the best of their ability, and then almost like forget about that paragraph because they're going the tree mindset. Don't look for what is this sentence saying or what does this word mean. Look for the big picture. So don't chop up your reading and forget what you've already read. So again, look at how everything is blending together. All right, I'm going to look at Brandon's chat here. Yeah, so again, he's saying this is Brandon as an expert student who's been through this class before. Don't focus on reading out of context. Look for the big meaning. So thanks for reinforcing that, Brandon. These are things not to do. Now let's talk about what to do. Before you do that, or before we move on to doing that, let's dive into Dylan's got a question, and then I actually have a question for everybody. So everyone who's live with me tonight, I want you to answer my question in the chat here in a minute. But let's look at Dylan's question. So Dylan's asking, for my summer work, I'm reading In Cold Blood and have to identify literary and rhetorical devices that the author uses to achieve his argument. Okay, that sounds like a very typical AP Lang summer assignment. However, his argument won't become apparent to me until after I finish the book. Okay, fair point. How can I read the book and complete the assignment if I don't know the argument and don't have time to read the book twice? Totally. All right, so that's kind of the core. In fact, I love that you said I don't have time to read the book twice, because we are not going to have time to read any passage twice this year, because everything we do is going to be under a time setting, at least for the exam itself. So you have to annotate for ways and look for ways that he's building toward meaning, even though you're not sure until the very end what that actual meaning or purpose is. So that's going to be the same skill set. So your teacher's doing it right. She or he is giving you an assignment that's actually going to be scalable to a nonfiction passage. So I know you won't know the exact argument, But again, you won't know the exact argument of a nonfiction text on our test or our exam until you've read it. But you've got to be reading, annotating, and thinking really critically as you're reading. We don't have time to read anything twice, you're right. So think of it this way. How is he building towards a purpose in cold blood? That's what you're annotating for. So really, don't overthink the whole argument like buzzword. Just say, okay, what's his purpose here? How is he building towards it? So don't feel like you need to go back after you've read it and change your annotations. Just think about it that way as you're reading. And I love this question right now because it's going to launch us into how to read as an AP student. As you're reading, you don't know the exact purpose or argument, but you can see, okay, how is this building? And that's the right mindset to have. What is this building towards? How is this author building towards this point? Again, you're going to see how all these pieces build together for the bigger picture. So it's kind of backwards. So what I said, don't lose the forest for the trees. This assignment in cold blood is basically saying, look for all the trees and then make the forest, right? So like you're picking up pieces along the way and then you're realizing, okay, this is the main point. And that's a pretty fair push. Thanks for the question, Dylan. Any other questions, please keep popping them in. I'll pause and we'll talk about them. All right, so here's my question for you all. How do you typically read difficult passages? I'll leave that pretty vague. I just want you to post that into the chat. Like, how do you tackle, what reading strategies do you have in your wheelhouse? This could be any type of reading, a novel, a short story, a poem even, a nonfiction text, a current event, anything. What do you do to be successful when you read difficult passages? So if you could just post that into the chat as we're talking through this. My students who are juniors read a lot of nonfiction, but we also read some really difficult texts. We even read The Scarlet Letter. The Scarlet Letter is a very difficult novel, and that's why I do it, because it's actually, the students like it a lot, right? But not until they understand it. So we have to build up the skill set of what do I do when I have a difficult passage. All right, so Dylan said lots of internal screaming. Fair enough. I do that too, I'm sure. And I'm actually not joking. When I get to the bottom of a paragraph, I'm like, oh crap, I don't know what I just read. I'm like so mad at myself, but I go back, I make sure I reread it, I use these skill sets. So try to pick apart sections in it, whether based on rhetoric, style, tone, etc. Yeah, totally. What you want to do is have like what I call like latch on points. Points where, okay, I don't understand this whole paragraph, but I do understand this sentence. Let me reread that and then build around it. So yeah, latch onto what you understand, but do reread it and try to figure out, okay, what more meaning can I make from this text? Now, we're not going to talk a lot about timing tonight, but that will be a lot of my and other AP Lying live stream focuses as we go this year, because timing is a pretty big tension. But timing doesn't matter until we have the skill sets to really do our best reading a nonfiction text, or just text in general, really. Because reading literature, although slightly different, we have a lot of the same skills that we develop. When we read The Scarlet Letter, for example, and we get stuck, we use these same things. We go back, we reread the topic sentence. So that's a skill I want you to remember. If you're lost on a paragraph, reread the topic sentence. Ground yourself there. If you understand like the third sentence, reread that, and then go back and read the first two and see, okay, I know what the third sentence says. How can I use that to better understand the first two sentences? So this is really just a workaround. It just depends on what you understand the first time through. All right, so let's talk now about how to read like an AP student. All right, so again, keep your forest up. What you can't do when you get stuck is just internally scream and call it a day, right? So what are these things that we do? When I say keep your head up, look for the forest, it's again, you're latching onto the trees. You're latching onto the parts you do understand. You're looking at the little pieces, but you're always asking, how does this fit together in the larger work? And that's the key here. So again, as I'm going through, I'm emphasizing the first paragraph. I'm emphasizing the topic sentence of every paragraph. And I'm seeing how all of these things fit together. That is my goal. All right, the rhetorical triangle. We're going to talk about this tonight. This is going to be a part of a lot of our AP Lang sessions, especially early on. And again, it won't just be me streaming. It'll be other students, other teachers who are AP language experts. But you'll hear a lot of us, depending on the topic, talk about the rhetorical triangle, or you might hear us call it the rhetorical situation. Tonight is how to read like an AP student, but this is really about reading and writing. Because in order to read like an AP student, you have to think about the rhetorical triangle. In order to write effectively, you have to read effectively. Because 2 of our 3 essays require substantial college level reading. This rhetorical triangle is especially important in the analytical essay. So let's talk about the rhetorical triangle. If anyone has a question, please pop it in. But the rhetorical triangle basically says this. Think about the relationship between the subject of the work, the speaker of the work, and the primary or intended audience of the work. So sometimes you'll see like arrows connecting subject and audience, subject and speaker, speaker and audience, because it's all about the relationship, the interconnectedness of these 3 key components of any text. So you've got to get in the head of the audience. And I'll be honest, I read the rhetorical analysis passage last year as an AP reader. Students generally understand the subject and the speaker. The audience is the biggest growth point for most students. So put yourself in the head of the audience. Put yourself in the mindset of the audience. If this is a work written in 2003, that's a slightly different audience than a work written in 2019. If it's written in 1819, it's a vastly different audience in terms of who the audience is and what the audience believes. So let's actually kind of break this down to the most important things I want you thinking about. So you'll hear it called the rhetorical situation. You'll hear it called occasion. There's lots of words that describe the primary thing I want you thinking about. Number 1, you have to be thinking about what is happening at the time of the writing about the subject. So let's say the subject is race relations in America. It's an important subject no matter when you talk about it, but what's happening regarding subject in 2019 is very different than 1963 and is very different than 1863, right? So you've got to really be thoughtful. You're using some background knowledge here. What is happening regarding the subject at the time of the writing? If it's race relations in America in 2019, I'm probably talking about police brutality and the mistreatment of many African Americans by police. That's the number 1 thing, or one of the number 1 things that is consistently in the news the last few years about race relations in America. If I'm thinking 1963, I'm thinking Martin Luther King's civil rights movement, Malcolm X's point of view. I'm thinking just like the height of the civil rights movement. If I'm thinking 1863, I'm thinking this is in the era of slavery, but also there's an abolitionist movement. So I have to put myself there. I am not the primary audience. You are not the primary audience of most texts that we will read this year. So although I might have opinions about race relations in America today, that's not what I have to think about as a reader. My background knowledge is, what do I know is happening in 1964 or in 1864? Second thing I want you thinking, and this is the leap that I want you really pushing yourself on this year, this is the biggest growth point. What does the audience think about the subject at the time of the writing? So the hard part here, or the most important step here that a lot of students skip, is you have to identify who the audience is. So in 1964 or 1963, when it's a civil rights movement, if there's a civil rights speech being addressed, being given, I have to think, okay, is this a primarily African American audience, a primarily white audience, or both? Likewise, it's not as simple as that. What would the audience be thinking? Now, sometimes the audience is going to agree. Sometimes the audience is going to think different thoughts. So let's say it's about race relations. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King had two very different approaches and opinions about how to have better rights for African Americans. So if Malcolm X is talking to a certain amount of people, they might agree with him. Malcolm X goes over here, they might disagree with him. So here's what I want you thinking. Who's the intended audience? Would they agree with the speaker or not? What do I know about their beliefs? That's something you always are going to have to think about. And obviously it's going to be easier or harder depending on your background knowledge given on a certain topic. So they're always going to provide for you, and by they I mean College Board, on an essay, a rhetorical analysis essay, or multiple choice passage, 2 to 3 sentences of background knowledge. You must read that. It's so important. So don't skim over that. Take your time, read that well. Read the provided background knowledge. And before you read the first word, think about what I've been talking about. The rhetorical situation, the relationship between the speaker, the subject, and the audience. If you can do that, you're a step ahead of a lot of students. A lot of students just dive right in. Take yourself, ground yourself. The more time you think at the beginning about the right things, the rhetorical situation, the better that reading is going to go for you. All right, now let's talk practically why it's important to read with a pencil. I say this all the time in my classes. Now, I call it annotating because that's what it is. My students walk into me, so I've been in school for a while. This is already, we're kind of a year-round school. This is my 5th week of school at this point. When I had the annotation talk with my students, half of them love me immediately because annotations to them is a beautiful word. Half of them look at me like I'm this crazy guy because they think annotations is the biggest waste of time. So let's talk about how to not waste your time, how to annotate effectively all year. On the AP exam, you are able to write, not with a pen, but with a pencil on your multiple choice. Quick side note, you will write with a pen on your essays. You will write with a pencil for the Scantron with the multiple choice. So get used to that, annotating with a pencil. So half of my students, I say, all right, time to annotate. They're like, hey, can I go to my locker? I need to go get my 4 different color highlighters because I gotta do this right. The other half are like, all right, I already don't like this class. I already don't like this lesson. I don't like to annotate. So let's talk about practically why there's a spot in the middle of loving it and hating it and not doing it and color coding for 4 different colors, right? So 2 main reasons why I encourage you to annotate and I encourage my students to annotate. 1, annotations will keep you engaged. We have all been there where we read an entire passage. Teacher's like, hey, what'd you read about? And you're like, lots of words, right? Lots of internal screaming going on in your mind, like, crap, why'd they call on me? So when I was in college, this happened to me all the time, where I was just like, my mind was wandering. We weren't reading in class, we were reading for homework. I'd get to the bottom of the text. A friend would be like, hey, what was that reading about? I'm like, I actually don't even know because I just wasn't engaged. So if you annotate, you're catching yourself drifting off. Now we're under a time setting through AP Language this year for the exam. So it's really important that we maximize our time and engagement. So if you don't know what to annotate, it's because either A, you just disengaged, or B, you don't understand the text because it's that hard. That's okay. It's going to happen to the best readers in every class this year. Texts are so hard, you will not understand the nuance of the text or even like the basic meaning of the text upon a first read through. That's something we're going to get better and better at as we go. When you realize you can't annotate, you're going to go back, you're going to reread, you're going to do those things that we talked about earlier. All right, and second, and hear me out, annotation's actually going to save you time. Just like Dylan had to go read In Cold Blood and annotate or mark stuff down as he went, we're going to use those same strategies for AP Language. You don't have time to read a text twice. You do have time to read the text once well and then answer some questions with it. Again, I don't even recommend looking at the questions until you feel confident I did my best on this text. Once you've annotated, you'll go back, you'll go to the questions, you'll flip back to your annotations, you'll look at what you have. You don't have time to reread. You'll lean on your annotations quite heavily on the multiple choice round. We have some live streams coming up that will model and talk through some different AP multiple choice practice. Again, focus on if you read well, if you annotate well, your scores will go up. It's still going to be tough, but they will be better than if you obviously did not read well, or even if you didn't annotate, because annotations are a time saver, actually. You'll get to more questions, actually. Obviously, you got to be efficient then with your annotations. So here's what I want you to do. Now, feel free to totally modify this, but this is my strong recommendation. I require my students to do this until they kind of graduate out of it. Now, some of my students, graduate is probably the wrong word here, because that implies like there's something better beyond. What I mean is, once they can prove to me they have a better way for themselves, they don't have to do this anymore. But most of my students say, okay, you've convinced me, this is the best way to go. It's the most efficient, and it's actually the most beneficial. So first, underline key anchors. Underline key phrases that will anchor you in the text. I keep calling it that. Find an anchor sentence. It's either a sentence you really understand or one of the most important sentences to the overall meaning of the text. Then, bracket every chunk of text. You have to determine the chunk of text by the shift in topic or tone. That's what advanced readers do, is look for where things slightly shift. Write a bullet point summary just off to the margin on what that chunk of text is saying. And then lastly, clarify vague pronouns. So if there's a it, circle it, figure out what it is referring to. If there's a he that's not obvious, circle he, draw a line back to who he is referring to, etc. Again, that takes 2 seconds. The hard part is figuring out who it or what it refers back to, but that's comprehension of a text. So we have to comprehend the text. All right, let's talk about number 2 here for a second. As you bracket every chunk of text, you have to identify the chunk. On the SAT, for example, which a lot of people take junior year, it's not as crucial that you identify the shift because there's a lot smaller paragraphs. On AP language, there could be an entire multiple choice passage that's one huge long paragraph. Well, clearly there's going to be shifts in topic or tone. You've got to identify them. Once you do, bracket it, throw in your quick summary. Again, therefore you don't have to read lines 10 to 20. You just look at what you wrote in the margins. That's actually going to save you time. And I started this here as well. Read to comprehend, not to answer questions. That is super important. So I'm saying it again. Give yourself a chance. If you're like, no, I promise you I will do better by reading first, that's fine. Give my way a shot, see if you even do better. I'm totally willing to say some of you might be better at looking at the questions first, but you don't know if you're actually better at it until you try both ways. Most students, statistically and anecdotally for me, most students that I come in contact with, do better if they don't even look at the questions until they read and understand the text. All right, I know we got a pretty small group tonight, but I have 2 questions that I want to ask, and then I want to just end with any questions you all have. So that's kind of a pretty quick presentation tonight. I wanted to really have some time here for any questions that you had to start the year. Remember, Brandon's back tomorrow talking about the rubrics. That's a very writing-heavy start to the year. But everyone, if you could just throw this into the chat. I started a poll earlier, but now let's just talk a little bit more practically, kind of flesh that out. What are you most nervous about this year? So everyone just take a second, throw that down at the chat. In our poll, 5 people said that they were most nervous about the writing. So hopefully you can come tomorrow night to see the breakdown of the rubrics. 2 people said the reading. And again, they do go hand in hand, absolutely. All right, so throw here on the chat, what are you most nervous about this year? Now we can kind of talk around that. And I'll start kind of sharing out some of my students as you're typing those. So a lot of my students kind of going back to Dylan's point, I'm really worried about making a leap from fiction heavy to nonfiction heavy. So let's talk through that. Take all the skills you know and understand through your literary analysis, and what I want you to do is just translate that when possible. Now, annotations are going to be way more important this year, but the skills are often the same. So let's not act like they're super, super separate. Instead, let's take what we're already good at and translate them over. So that's the biggest thing. Like, give yourself credit where credit's due. You're in AP language because you are self-motivated. I'm assuming things about you, but you're self-motivated and you're a good reader and writer. And by good, I just mean like, you're good. There's no like parameters around that. But when I'm thinking through like what a lot of my students are nervous about, they often want to see AP language as like this totally new and different thing. Yeah, there's going to be differences, but talk about or like view yourself as, hey, I got this. I know what I've got. I know what I'm good at. How can I translate those skills over? I got a couple popping up. So Hannah, let's read yours. So worried about analyzing text effectively during the multiple choice. Definitely about how to write in accordance to college board. Okay, so kind of both, right? Reading and writing. Totally makes sense. Guys, I love that you're here. It's only August 20th. Not even everyone's back to school yet. And we're already thinking the right things. So there's no negativity in, oh man, I'm like nervous about these things. Let's just call it what it is. These are the things that we want the most help with. So my biggest advice for the first few months in terms of reading, focus on reading. The time, we're going to shave off time and effectiveness as we go this year. So right now you just want to, again, put these habits into place that we're talking about. Read to read, read to understand. Again, look at the big forest for the trees. In terms of writing, yeah, absolutely. Like that is probably the bigger difference between AP language and maybe 10th grade English in terms of just like what the rigorous writing expectations are. So just know like you're in the same boat as everyone else. And the fact that you care enough to be here tonight, I'm feeling really good about just our trajectory this year. We're going to be doing a lot of live streams on Fiveable about writing and how to craft writing and how to just meet College Board's expectations. So yeah, the more that you guys can keep coming on here, the more we can just address any concerns you have. All right, the next one, most nervous about finishing the writing section. Yeah, absolutely. So quick story, 3 years ago, one of my best writers, and this is kind of like a horror story. So one of my best writers in my AP class wrote 2 beautiful essays in the 3 hours that are provided. Actually, not 3 hours, sorry. In the 2 hours and 15 minutes that are provided, and didn't even touch the 3rd essay. And it was so sad. So she just like was so in the zone, she completely lost track of time. So that is a cautionary tale. Even if you could say so much more in, let's say, the analytical essay, you got to try to keep to those time constraints. So we're going to talk very practically on Fiveable. So I want you in your classes hopefully just focus on developing skills as readers, thinkers, writers. This is kind of a tutoring exam platform. So we're going to talk very practical about how to prioritize your 40 minutes with writing. So you can do it. I'll be honest though, compromises will be made. So in order to basically like get to all 3 essays, you're gonna have to cut yourself off for all 3 essays to get to the next 2. So you really want to like keep to those time restraints that are kind of shackles on you as a writer. But again, it's just the restraints of standardized testing. So that's a really good thing to be thinking of already. All right, let's look at the last one. This time last year, I was afraid I wouldn't know how to answer certain types of multiple choice questions like inference and figurative language. Yeah, so like the specific types of multiple choice questions are valid. My advice to you, anyone who's like looking at this in August or even like September, if you watch a replay, don't worry about the specific type of questions yet until you're feeling really good about just like reading these very, very difficult texts. Because again, and I hear that, and again, it's the right thought, but maybe not for yet, not for this early in the school year. So Right now, you just want to say, okay, what's the best I can do for this passage? What's the most I can understand? Can I understand the nuance of this text? And then most of the questions, honestly, will fall in line if you have a super high understanding of how the text is put together. And then we'll have plenty of time the rest of the year to talk about like different question types, that kind of thing, both through Fiveable and with your teacher as you're practicing. All right, I would like to end it on a positive note. This is my last thing. And then if there's any questions, let's take time. If there's anything on anyone's mind, I kind of wanted to carve out time again tonight for just pop in some questions, anything you have for AP Lang this year. But let's keep it positive. So we're nervous about some stuff, but also what are you most excited about this year? So anyone who's live with me, I'd like you to throw your positive thoughts on the chat. What are you most excited about this year? And let's keep it AP Lang specific. If you want to throw like other classes you're excited about too, feel free. But definitely throw something down that you're excited about for AP Lang. And I'll tell you the truth. My students, I'm going to start like just as you're typing, I'll share out what I'm seeing from my students. They're most excited about actually kind of taking a breather and doing something a little bit different than the normal English class. We do a lot of nonfiction. We do a lot of like one-day standalone lessons, and that's actually kind of fun for a lot of my students. Contrast that with Scarlet Letter, which is fun for different reasons, but also at times a slog, right? In terms of just like, man, we're still in this book. Hey, if you don't like the Scarlet Letter, you're stuck with it for a few weeks, right? Again, pros and cons to that for sure. And I like to have both aspects into my classroom. But actually, a lot of my students just are excited about, hey, I like coming in and not knowing the nonfiction text we're going to read today, but knowing we're going to do a deep dive of this text. All right, so let's see a couple things in the chat. Reading Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, cool. I'm excited to work to develop writing skills. Absolutely. What I have found, Teresa and everyone, is that this class, and I would love to hear if anyone disagrees, because that'd be exciting, but this class typically is the best class to teach and to learn writing at the high school level. So this class is assigned to English 101 in college. English 101 is the class that everyone signs up for in college, no matter your major, no matter anything. They're like, oh, you're a student? Go ahead and take English 101. It's like our foundational thinking and reading class and writing class. So we intentionally just are very skill-based with AP language. So no matter what college you go to, we would like, if you get a 4 or 5 on this exam, and a lot of colleges even take 3s, we would like you to think, yeah, you could take English 101 in any college because you're that advanced of a thinker, reader, and writer. So it's really fun, I think, and I love teaching AP language because I love teaching writing, just walking students through the writing process throughout the year, and just through lots of repetition, lots of like deliberate practice and feedback. You guys are all going to become amazing writers this year. Also, Great Gatsby, I use that in my class too. It's a lot of fun, so I'm glad you get to read that. Let's see, learning more about analyzing text and writing like a college student. Yeah, like what I was just talking about. I love your phrasing, writing like a college student, because that's what this class is really all about. Take your mindset away from being a high school student. Every time you walk into the door, I'm going to make myself bigger here since it's just me talking. Every time you're walking through the door, act like you're walking through a college door. I should have said on my slide because that's how to think and read like an AP student. So you've got the right mindset there. It's going to be a really good year. And we got one more. The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks is so interesting. Yeah, that's really cool. You read it for summer. Cool. I would like you to do one more thing just so we can kind of see where we're starting off. If you had to read a summer assignment, tell me what it was. If you didn't, if you were lucky and had a free summer, tell me that in the chat as well. My students read a nonfiction book over the summer. So I'll type that in. My students read David and Goliath by Malcolm Gladwell. Our first few weeks back, like I said, I'm in week 5 already. We were doing a deep dive of that book, talking about, again, what are all these details being put together, and then what's the big picture. So very similar to the question that Dylan asked about In Cold Blood. We didn't know the full argument until the very end, but I had students tracking it as they went. And then as we went back to school, we were looking at the big picture. So again, take a second, throw in the chat. This will be how we end the day. What was your summer assignment, if any, this past summer? So yeah, my students actually just got done writing a paper. There was a big analytical, like college-like paper on how Malcolm Gladwell proved his purpose. So it was like an analytical task as a writer on David and Goliath. Ooh, Nubia, you read 8 articles. That's interesting. Most summer assignments are novels or books. So let's see, we had, oh, Hannah got lucky, free summer. Okay, that's fair. Your school doesn't do summer assignments. Michelle didn't have one. You're lucky too. Yeah, so it just depends on the teacher. There's certainly pros and cons, right? Oh, 8 artifacts. Nubia, what if you can like throw on the chat, like what kind of artifacts are you talking about? That's really interesting to me. Teresa had to watch a documentary. Hey, that's a fun summer assignment. If you have to watch a movie, there's worse ways to spend your summer, right? Yeah, it's really cool. So I think it's really cool to see like there's so many different approaches to AP language, and that's why I like the course so much. I used to teach in Florida. I taught AP Lang there. Now I'm in Colorado. I do a lot of things that are similar. I do a lot of things different in Colorado, just like to meet the needs of my students out here versus in Florida. But I think it's really cool that you can take so many approaches and still meet the same goals. So the cool thing is we all have different experiences. Matterhorn, cool. We all have different experiences. Like in the classroom every day, we all have really strong AP language teachers. We all have really cool peers that we get to work with. But the point of Fiveable is going to be, let's bring all of that together and talk about how to be successful on this exam and therefore get that college credit. I love AP language because if you're successful on the exam, you would be successful in English 101. So it's very, very skill based. With all that said, so we're taking all of our experiences, putting them together, and like saying, okay, no matter what my teacher had me do today, here's what I have to do to be successful in the exam. So our numbers will hopefully be growing as this year continues. Pass on the word. Anyone in your classes, because we got people from all different states tonight, even though we have a small group. Pass the word along. This is going to be a really cool platform. I'm excited to be working with you all. I'm even more excited probably to see Stephanie working next week, Brandon working starting tomorrow. Just hearing different voices, again, different backgrounds, different experiences, different methods even, but all coming towards the same goals. All right, so Nubia, 2 full-length novels and 6 other types. Oh man, you had a lot of summer assignments. That's really cool though. That sounds like a great like kind of project or kind of synthesis of material. All right, what practice assignments, this will be our final question here, looks like, Michelle. What practice assignments do you recommend for AP Lang to do on my own? Good question. To be honest, and I know it sounds like I'm pitching something and selling something, I'd say early on, my biggest recommendation is if you're not a Fiveable Plus member, that's $5 a month. It's really cheap. It's way cheaper than if I asked you to go buy a prep test book. And I actually believe, and part of it's because I'm helping to put this together, that we're going to be more practical and more like hands-on with you than a test prep book. So I don't think you need extra time practicing. Here's what I ask of my students, and I love this question. It's coming from the right place for sure. You guys spend a lot of time doing the right things. What I like Fiveable to be is just talking about what the right things are. So when you go back to your class or when you go back to your homework for AP language, you're taking your time, you're doing it right. You're like really all in on it. So instead of saying, hey, go like read this article, take the homework that you're doing in class. A lot of you are in AP US history. Take the readings from there and read it like an AP student. So take an hour with me tonight, let's say. We talked about it. You don't have to have any extra reading now. You just have to do the readings you do, like we talked about tonight. Tomorrow, when Brandon goes over the new rubrics, take that in. Start to apply that mindset of like how to write successfully in AP this year in your classrooms. Now, I'm saying that because there's so many approaches to AP language. Now, I will say some must-haves with all that in mind, because that seems kind of almost like a cop-out answer, like do what you're doing, but do it better. But that actually is like in the core of what I believe. And that's why I'm a part of Fiveable, because I'm not here to add more work. Actually, I'm saying, hey, come with me an hour a week. Maybe there's a couple live streams a week, and that's actually going to save you time, or like build in the right type of practice in class and in your homework. Here's my final thought though, because there's so many different approaches here to the classroom. If your teacher is not giving you a lot of short nonfiction text to really work through, work on some short nonfiction texts. So let's say you're in the Scarlet Letter, you're in the Great Gatsby, whatever the book is, excuse me, and that's all you're doing like 5 days a week for 4 weeks. You are missing out on that experience of short nonfiction texts. I'm going to throw a link in on the chat that basically says there's so many different like nonfiction places here. So let me just Google this real quick. Because I know what website is, and I'm just going to throw it on in case this helps. Only use this if you feel like you're not getting enough nonfiction. I'm not assigning this. I'm not even recommending it unless you're just not getting what you want out of the class. So it's called AmericanRhetoric.com. Sorry, my internet took a minute to load it. And I'm going to throw it right here now. Anytime you just want more, this is where I'm going to push you, because they're short nonfiction works. Any of these works, to be honest, could appear on the AP language exam. So bookmark this. I'm not even saying start with it. Maybe get a feel for the year. But again, if your teacher, or if you feel like your teacher isn't giving as much maybe nonfiction practice as I would recommend, or other students here are having, this is your supplementary source. It's free, and it's the perfect AP language resource. So that's a great question, Michelle. All right, I'm going to sign off. I hope you guys can come back tomorrow for Brandon. Brandon, thanks for being here tonight. He's going to do a really great kind of overview of the new rubrics. And then next week, we got some more live streams coming. So again, hopefully our numbers pick up. Keep spreading the word about Fiveable. If you have any feedback to make this better or more useful, I want to hear it. You can throw it down in the chat, or just reach out to us through Fiveable. But I'm going to ask every time, what else you need? That's the time to let me know. All right, guys, I'm really excited to be working with you this year. Have a great rest of the week. See ya.